literally in like a chicken coop. It was full of chicken poop. There were mice down inside the manifold. I mean, how cool would it be to see Lewis Hamilton race Kyle Larson?
Well, maybe you've seen the first video we did with Ray Evernham here with all of his IROC cars a handful of months ago, and he has a lot more now, so we had to come back and see him. What's new here? Well,
you've become my IROC buddy, my IROC expert. You've seen just about everything I've got. You've ridden in the two-seater, which we've had a blast with that car.
What was the life of this one? Where did you find it at?
Well, believe it or not, your YouTube channel helps me a lot. Since we do these things, people call me. They've been calling. They've seen your videos. They ask if I'm interested in cars or parts or pieces, and then we track them down, find out what they've got, go and visit them, and flew down to Louisiana, close to New Orleans, to grab these two, and he had a garage full of parts. And you meet a lot of great people who 30 or 40 years ago bought this stuff with great intention of restoring it. And you know, as they get older, it gets harder and harder to do that stuff. It gets more and more expensive, so they're letting it go. So when somebody calls us about an IROC part and they want to make a reasonable deal, we go and get it. You know, we have some people that call us up there, you know, they think the things might have been made out of gold or platinum. I don't know. But when somebody calls us with a reasonable deal, you know, we get it. Talk about the IROC series and the Porsches. The Porsches were real cars that were roll cages were put in them, and so were the first series of Camaros. This is what I call IROC Series 1 Camaro. It's not the right stuff, but you can see what these things look like. They were stock cars. There were no down tubes or anything like that. They were cars that were converted. They were bought at a dealership, whether it was Roger Penske's Chevrolet dealership in Pennsylvania or others. They actually have a VIN number from Chevrolet, and we've been in constant communication with Jay Signore and the folks at IROC. Certainly, it's been quite a journey trying to put all these pieces together after so many years, but really a lot of fun to be tracking down these cars. Trademark for the first two generations of Camaros. They started with a key.
I wonder if they stopped doing that in race cars in general, because somebody wasn't going to make the race because they couldn't find their keys.
Mark Donahue and all his group of Trans Am guys at Penske, you know, put roll cages in them, you know, got them ready for racing. We've got a lot of the history that came along with these cars, because this car and what we call the half the car upstairs there were from the original IROC series. This car was both orange and silver. We've been grabbing these things up, so I was lucky to get them with enough original parts to put that car together. And through the years, many of them get used in different SCCA, GT1, or Trans Am, so they get cut up and cannibalized. This car stayed really pretty good. That one we've got a little bit of work to do. Steel top, glass windshield, real steel hood, fenders with just fiberglass flares, and a lot of things that they would have done for Trans Am racing. The problem was IROC then went to Daytona and Michigan and Talladega, and the driver said, hey, we've got to have a real stock car. So Generation 2 Camaro, or the Banjo Matthews Camaros, tube frame, very much like what would have been a Grand National Sportsman at that time. So these cars are getting rarer and rarer, and I think right now we have probably more IROC stuff than anybody. At least that's what Mr. Penske told me.
This place is becoming big IROC garage now. You can change the sign.
We have a love for it here. I don't know where you can find cars that have this much history. You know, when you look at a car that's been driven by the Unsers, by Andretti, by Foyt, by Petty, by Earnhardt, you know, where do you get a car like that? A lot of the great sports cars and Indy cars have really been, you know, bought up, and they're well into to 6 and 7 figures. You know, these cars are still representative. You can still take them to the racetrack, and you know, when you look at the cars, that some of the cars that we have not been driven just by our great IndyCar and NASCAR and sports car stars, but we have cars here that have been driven by James Hunt, Brian Redman, and Niki Lauda. One of the cars that we have here was one of the original Generation 3 Camaros that I helped build. This car here is a pretty unique car. You know, there aren't many unicorns out there. There's 2 other unicorns that I know of that were 3rd generations Camaros that were not turned into Dodges. Richard Childress has one, and Dale Earnhardt Enterprises has one. This car, we're trying to find out how it got out of IROC. We bought it as a wreck. We believe we wrecked this car at Michigan tire testing, and it got trashed. At that time, it wasn't worth fixing, so I think that it somehow got sold. It sat in an old again, I hate to keep saying barn, but this was literally in like a chicken coop. It was full of chicken poop, and it was just a mess. It was still had the red. You can see the red in the thing. It had red number 19, and I 100% remember this car. I worked on it. Darrell Waltrip drove it at Michigan. I know that for a fact. No book, no paperwork with it, but I looked at it and like, this is a car that I built. We bought it from the guy, came with some body panels, because again, I feel like there aren't that many original Camaros out there, and this may be only the third one. Everything else has been changed back to a Camaro. Roger Penske may have one, I don't know, but I can't believe anybody else would have one. I have a good friend, Aaron Brown, over at the garage shop, who does incredible work too, by the way. Got a scanner. He duplicated the pieces we took in the bent chassis, and he duplicated other pieces, off of the scanner, and did an incredible job bringing this thing back to life. So we got the chassis back. We're gathering parts for it right now. We've got enough body panels to make the Camaro. We've got an original floor pan, but again, gathering 1980s vintage Banjo Matthews parts. So if somebody knows, hey, if you got some trail arms out there, or some old Banjo lowers, uppers, things like that, we need those for this car. But
would this have been one of the Banjo chassis that has a Torino floor pan?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We actually had to get a Ford floor pan for it. And the floor pan was a little bit rotted out. This is how the cars came from Banjo Matthews to IROC, and then we put all the brackets on, the seat mounts, window net mounts, dash, all of that stuff. But this is basically what you would call a surface plate car. It would come with a roof and windshield bed and nothing else.
What color and driver name are you going to restore this one to?
Oh, this one was the Red 19, so it will be Red 19. And as I said, I'll have to do the research to find out who drove it. But I know that one of the drivers definitely drove it was Darrell Waltrip.
How long does it typically take for you to get a car like this to a full?
In the IROC days?
In the IROC days and right now?
It's going to take us a while, because gathering the parts and the history is the hardest thing. That's the slowest thing. But back then, you got to remember, with that IROC team, no kidding, we built, I think it was 14 cars in 3.5 months. So they'd come in, we'd put the brackets on it, they'd paint it, and we'd assemble it. We'd get a chassis. The chassis would come in, let's say on a Monday, and by Saturday it was rolling around, running around.
That's wild.
Yeah. But we had a complete assembly line for doing it. I remember building 20 wiring harnesses, and I remember building, 20 welding, 20 radiator deals, and you just do that. And then when the chassis came, we were just assembling, and that's where Jay Signore is a master. He's a master at saving man hours. There's just an incredible amount of famous asses that have been in those seats, if you will.
That looks like a factory seat. That's not the one.
That's not the correct seat for this car. Again, through parts and pieces, we were able to get some of the original seats, but that is not one of them. This car was being modified that someone was going to take it racing, and obviously didn't have the right seat, because IROC at that time, as they changed cars, they kept a lot of the driver's seats, because they were going to have the same drivers for the following generation of cars. So many of the seats that were bolted in these cars ended up in the next generation Camaro.
Did they run with a factory steering wheel, or did they change that too?
That steering wheel actually looks correct to what they had, because we have either the Unser car, which we may have a steering wheel in it. So the Unser car and the Redmond car actually had many of the original pieces on it. So this car here, again, is very correct, and as you can see, does not have the correct seat. Okay. This may be the correct year. I don't know if it's the correct seat for this car, but as you can see, the steering wheel, same thing.
This is the one you were working on when we were here last time, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah. And again, this one and the Brian Redmond, James Hunt, AJ Foyt car are all out of that same generation, as well as the orange car and our yellow Heffa car upstairs.
You got another Firebird too, didn't you?
We do. We added to the collection. I have a good friend, a good racing friend. His name is Kent Hussey. He and his wife Melissa have an incredible collection of cars, and we have done several restorations for him, and he he offered me this car back. Elio Castroneves drove this car among several other cars, but I think Elio Castroneves is one of the greatest racing drivers of our time. You know, 4 Indianapolis wins. I think he's got 3 or 4 24-hour Daytona wins. You know, he's just an incredible race driver. When they changed from the Camaros and Daytonas and Avengers, at that time NASCAR was really getting into aerodynamics, and the cars were always built on Banjo Matthews chassis and what we call a rear steer. This car, these cars were built by Mike Laughlin and then switched to front steer because that's the way the direction was going. And at that time, Banjo Matthews wasn't building cars anymore, so this car became a very modern version of what the NASCAR would have been Xfinity Series would have been at that time. And as you can see, this is a front steer car. Just meaning the tie rods basically are in front of the ball joints, where the other cars we call rear steer cars, the tie rods and steering are behind the ball joints. It's simple as that. But you know, this car was basically designed to race on the radial tire, and you can see it is very much like a Laughlin. They were Busch Gray National at that time. But, you know, the IROC guys always did incredible work. Jay Signore and his group, again coming out of the Penske mold, very into detail, and you can see all of the little aerodynamic details on this car that were bolt on and bolt off because it took it to several different places. You know, Michigan, Talladega. They'd also run road courses. You know, they ran Nazareth, Pennsylvania, lots of places like that. I don't want to say restoration, but just kind of a mechanical, you know, refreshing of the car. But other than that, you know, it's as we got it. And as I said, Kent and Melissa Hussey have first-class stuff, so I know this car was well taken care of.
Is that the same roof flap piece as the Daytonas?
I'm not sure if it's the same exact piece, but same style. They went with, you know, the single style.
I wondered if there was any shared components, like how they had the Camaro roofs on the Daytonas.
Well, they may have used the mold. You know, we can go look. Let's go look. But you got to remember that as all of the Avengers were sold off, so they couldn't take many molds out of it. You know, these things were sold off, and I believe it's a little bit of a different mold. This one seems lighter. The vortex generators are a little bit different.
I'd heard somewhere that these Firebird bodies were not actually 1-to-1 scale with the production car. Is that true?
Well, because wheelbase would be different, width would be different. You know, back then, you know, they didn't do everything on computer. Randy Wittine and his group, Randy was a great designer at General Motors, responsible for many of the winning racing Corvettes for many years. Randy was the lead designer on this IROC stuff. So they would take a stock-bodied Firebird or stock-bodied Camaro and then do it out of clay. Widths would be wider, the track would be longer, and they would just keep modeling it out of clay and then make the molds based off of the clay car, which was really cool to watch them do.
Interesting. Yeah, this one runs, doesn't it?
Yeah, this one runs. This one runs.
These are my favorite ones to listen to.
Well, let me see, you know, if old Ray can get his butt into Elio Castroneves' seat, which is a little bit difficult. I'm going to shut that hood because if I can get my butt in that seat, we're going to sneak this thing out the door, and you're going to video it going down the road, and then you're probably going to video the police arresting me. But it won't be the first race car that we've driven down this road. You know, there's so much information about the old IROC series on the internet now. It's really cool to see so much interest in these cars again, because the story of IROC and how it just grew to so much popularity in the 70s, and the legendary drivers that drove it, you know, it is really a bigger part of auto racing's history than a lot of people give it credit for. These babies were just like race cars with this whole giant old steering wheel. All right, let's see if we can get this one to start, and if it starts, we'll sneak it out of here. see if I can get my butt out of Elio Castroneves' seat in this car. Well, you know, the thing again that impresses me as a crew chief mechanic for some, just you know how sanitary these cars were on the inside for this time. You know, it certainly has got Penske's mark of excellence and culture on it. But you know, Jay Signore is an amazing mentor. So many of us that came out of the Jay Signore School of Racing went on to be crew chiefs in NASCAR, and IndyCar, and sports car racing. You know, he is someone who is responsible for a pretty big footprint in auto racing because of the things that he, as I said, he's just won. Students of the College of Jay Signore and IROC have gone on to win so many major racing championships with you know, the things that he taught us. And again, you look around at inside of this car, and you can just see how sanitary these things always were.
Were a lot of the guys building these cars in New Jersey modified guys that weren't from NASCAR land? And
Jay took guys, you know, that were all short track racers, drag racers, you know, whether it was Wall Stadium or Englishtown Raceway Park, or guys out of dealerships, and turned them into race car mechanics.
I thought that part was interesting because the headquarters was in Tinton Falls, New Jersey, wasn't it? It wasn't here. It
was in Tinton Falls, New Jersey. Jay lived in Manasquan, New Jersey, and when the story goes, as when Mr. Penske asked Jay to come back, there were 4 partners in IROC. Roger Penske, Les Richter, you know, the legendary football player and general manager of Riverside, Mike Phelps, who was the TV man, and Jay Signore. And Jay said, look, I'll do it, do the work, and we'll get it going, but I want to do it here, based in New Jersey, close to my home, because I don't want to, you know, Jay loves boats, and he lives right on the Manasquan River, and he's like, look, I don't want to go back to Reading, Pennsylvania, where it's cold and I can't use my boat.
That answers a lot of questions. I always wondered why it was there. What do you plan on doing with this car?
This car will stay in my collection. You know, we're going to, I'm going to keep one of my favorites of each series. We plan on selling the others. Hope to get something going on racetracks with them. What's really hard is they've all got so much history. You know, it's a coin toss. But you know, as I said, I'm a fan of Elio's because I've got to work with him through SRX and a couple of other things. I think he's an amazing driver, so I'll keep this car. Did
the engines in these stay the same from when the Firebird was conceived until the very end?
Yeah, the engines, they went back to General Motors. They were basically, you know, a combination. At this time, IROC was building its own engines. They worked with John Blewett from Flowtech in New Jersey, another modified racer. But they basically, you know, they kept the horsepower down in the 500 range, so longevity. These cars were plenty fast with that. These engines, you know, Pontiac supplied, they had their own cylinder heads and whatnot, but these engines were actually built from the guys at IROC. You know, if you look at the brake systems got better because these cars ran on the road courses, which is, you know, why some of these are block offs. That block off is there for running the speedway, but when you take that off, the brake duct is under the inside of it. Aerodynamics, again, under the front of the car and whatnot. 36 is there because this was a 36, car number 36 for them. Move the batteries and things like that off to the right side, you know, to make the car a desirable road race car. The use of NACA ducts for rear brakes and cooling, all of the things that were coming into play. One of the biggest things that you see is the safety, the way the seats were mounted, and the seats going from the fiberglass buckets that were used in the 80s to all aluminum, you know, good containment seats, the way the seat brackets and things were adjustable, making sure that the drivers were safer. So we learned a lot about safety throughout the years. And as I said, you know, Jay Signore and his guys have just continuously worked to make things better.
So this is car 36. How high did the chassis numbers go to before they stopped?
Again, this is one of the later ones. This is one of the newer ones with good history, but we're trying to, you know, part of the thing, you know, Jay's 86 years old, and a lot of the records now, some of that stuff's confusing. So Matt Yoakum, who you know from ESPN and from Fox and NBC television, is become our historian here, and he works with Jay quite a lot, trying to go through and sort all those numbers out to find out which cars exactly were out there, who won exactly and what, you know, and where they are now. More importantly, like where we're trying to find all of the cars. Matt and I are going to do an IROC registry so we can really get aware of where are all of these things, and do you have the car you think you have.
So if somebody watching this has one of these, they could
reach out. You can just send a note to Ray at rayevernham.com. Matt Yoakum and I are going to be posting some things where you can send stuff, but we have access to all of the IROC records from day one. I don't know that we have the Porsche records, but we have the Camaro records, Daytona records, Avenger records, and the Firebird records.
Do you have the big logbooks that came with these cars?
We do, and we're going through them now. And some of them, what's really cool is some of them have 3 or 4 logbooks because they've been through so much history. They started as a Camaro, and then they became a Daytona and an Avenger. So you have 2 or 3 books, and then these cars all came with the kind of a white notebook and a ton of things. But we've got shelves of books just gathering IROC information, and Matt just sits in front of it for hours sorting the stuff out.
That sounds like a fun job. It actually does. Looking through those old documentation is neat.
But you can see, turn this off. Like, people are just sending us tons and tons of stuff. I've got stuff spread out all over here, but my original book is here as well, my master book. Matt has got so much time because we've got so many different cars we're trying to put in order. You just look at, this is the kind of documentation that it came with the IROC car.
Wow.
It's car number 36, Laughlin Racing Products. All the documentations, brake calipers, electrical, body, the detail that Jay Signore and his group did was just amazing with these cars. So they're easily restorable, and they're easily documented.
Is there any of your handwriting in any of those logbooks?
Yeah. This car here, this is my handwriting on the cover, without a doubt. Yeah, and then there's records of me driving this car at Michigan. Let's see, it's Cleveland. Drove it to Michigan, Talladega, 88, 89, Riverside. I know I drove it to Riverside.
When it says Dave, is that Dave Marcus?
Dave Marcus, George Fulmer. And my job was to shake it down mechanically. Those guys would put the final mark on them, but they would shake it there. Ray. So, 87. A lot of this writing in there, it is, and all the setup sheets I did, that's all my handwriting.
I see greased tail shaft in there a lot. Was that something
It was something that we had to keep an eye on with those transmissions, because they just had a pushed-in bearing, and at those RPM, we had to keep greasing the tail shaft to make sure that we didn't tear up that bearing. But, here we are, for Daytona, and I left after the Daytona 500 in 1989. So then this is when the car became, it became a Dodge Daytona, and change books, and going through and identifying which car is which is not the easiest thing to do. Just tons and tons of pictures of how the cars were built. These are all pictures from when they tested the first one with Mark Donahue and his guys. There's the IROC guys out there. That's Mark getting out of one of the cars.
Who had all of these?
This came with the stuff that I bought out the guy from Louisiana, and he had gathered a lot of these things. So there's a picture of one of the cars that we have in the rack that it was used as something else. 1978 light blue, John Zaccarelli had that car. There's all of the IROC numbers in it. Again, any information that we could get on how to build them, how to do anything that we could do, and these books are gold. The books that come with these things. Some of the original IROC guys are, they're getting older, and they're sending me a lot of the memorabilia that they had because they know that we're putting it in a safe place and we're trying to do something to preserve the IROC series. There's the yellow car. That, again, Matt would know the history better than I do, but that car actually won some races, and then it was used as a Trans Am car. I believe the man's name was Orndorff. I believe that was his name. In Orndorff. He good Trans Am racer. We've got several cars that he had, but you know, they lightened it up, and we actually have another chassis front snout for it, because they cut holes in the one that was in it to try and lighten the car, because the IROC cars were never really about being light. But we do have all the parts, original parts, to put that one back together.
How do you get that Indy car? Do you put it on a forklift and get that up there?
Yeah, that Indy car really didn't weigh much at all. You know, I think it weighs about 660 pounds, so it doesn't weigh much. You know, so you know, the other cars are all on hydraulic lifts, but you know, the light cars, you know, that the little ferret right there, that car is all aluminum and titanium. It weighs less than 900 pounds.
And you put that up here with a forklift?
Yep.
What kind of, like, do you have like a skid or something to pick that up, or?
Yeah, or we just snatch them by the roll bar, take the bodies off, snatch them by the roll bar, and set them up there. Yeah.
This would be a precarious operation.
Yeah, but that's what we do. You know what I mean? What do you do? That's what garage guys do. If you find a way, you figure, you know, if you can't, you know, if we waited till we had everything properly, we'd never get anything done. Well, we've been able to come across things like the original sign-in sheets from a place like Riverside, you know, the IROC sign-in sheet, and you got guys like Peter Revson signing in, and Richard Petty, you know, all the, and you're like, and it's the sign-in sheet. So, you know, there's just so much history attached to this. You just didn't see those drivers together that often, and hopefully we can bring that back. I mean, how cool would it be to see Lewis Hamilton race Kyle Larson? And you know, and you know, Joseph Newgarden, you know, it would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be like a worldwide event, but probably even more so now in the age of technology and everything that it would have been in the 70s. Is like, I don't know how aware were Europeans of IROC whenever guys like Lauda would come over here and do that.
Well, Niki Lauda only came once, and that was, I don't know whether that was something that Bernie Ecclestone shut down or what, but we have the car that he drove.
I don't think this one was in here the first time either.
This is all done now. This is the most original IROC car that I have, by far. This car was bought directly from Jay Signore by a gentleman named Wayne Darling, who was a big modified guy, had a lot to do with Seekonk Speedway, helped a lot of people in racing. Bought this car, road raced himself just once or twice, and put it in his, you know, storage building. And he actually owned the O2 car. So I was talking to him about the history of the O2 car, and he said, well, I have another one. I said, really? And he told me about this one and made a deal with him to buy it. And when we got it back, we realized that, you know, this is as close to a true barn find IROC that you'll ever find. It has the original motor in it, the original transmission, you know, everything on this car. As I said, it only raced once or twice in the SCCA, but everything on the car is exactly as it was raced in IROC. And this car not only won the Riverside race with Darrell Waltrip in 1979, this car was used in a promotional deal at Sonoma Speedway, and we have records of it being driven by Paul Newman, Clint Eastwood, James Brolin, and Gene Hackman, and all in the same day. So this car's pretty cool. We also have a video of Paul Newman doing a drive around, talking about the car on the video. So this car is a race winner. It was used as a practice car, so it has again a tremendous history. And on top of that, it was driven by some of our era famous movie stars.
Yeah, that can't be duplicated. Not even now. That's like the golden age of America.
Yeah. Just, you know, it's a cool story for car guys that like cool stories. You know, it's the original stuff. We had to repaint needed a lower air dam. It had a couple little dings in the back, but other than that, we didn't repaint it. We cleaned it up. And as I said, this is the original Traco motor and has the original transmission in it. As you can see, the hood still has the chips and cracks and whatnot in it. And these cars still have steel hoods in them. But 100% the original Traco motor. And the only reason it had to be built because it sat for 30 years, and believe it or not, that there were mice down inside the manifold and had gotten down into the ports and everything. There was mice all through this car.
Yeah, this was the one that was at Promoter. But I saw that,
Correct.
yeah, on the cart.
He's been doing several for me, you know, so we're going to use that one as the template. He's also got one of the original IROC motors from the Generation 3 Camaros over there currently. But we will use this as a template to restore other cars.
I saw you were doing some 3D scanning. Was that of this car?
That was of this one, yeah. We're doing 3D scanning. We've got a 3D scan currently of this car, the new Unser car, where Richard Childress has a original 3rd generation Camaro. He's agreed to let us scan that, and then we'll scan the Firebird, and we'll have everything scanned except for Porsche.
Is that so you could reproduce the pieces that you can't find?
I'd like to be able to do that. Again, my goal is to pick one of those, like I like this body style, and to somehow come up with a series that we could build new cars that look like the old cars, because you know, these things are going to be valuable enough where people aren't going to want to race them and crash them, and they are metal, right? So they're not easily fixable. So I'd love to have a vintage IROC series, but with a new version of the car.
That's the thing that a lot of people want to see in some capacity.
If we could get the right drivers and the right, you know, it's got to be the right thing, right? It's got to be about entertainment. We've got some exciting announcements coming up about the IROC logos and trademarks and what we want to do in the future. But got a lot of people working really hard to help bring some notoriety to the series.
How could people watching this take an active role in propelling that cause?
Well, I think, you know, again, your videos help. They can reach out to us here, to either ray@rayevernham.com or det@rayevernham.com. They can also go to the Big Iron Garage website. They can go to the Ray Evernham Enterprises website. Just reach out to us. Heck, our phone number here is 704-360-1506. Leave us a message. But, you know, we're right now getting all things IROC, putting together information, gathering cars, parts, and pieces, and eventually, you know, we'll have a way to communicate with everybody about what's going on.
The whole history of this car and us riding in it at VIR is a separate video, which I'll link in the description. If you love racing history and you want to see it grow, make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video, subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything. It just tells you when we post a new one. And if you like this video, you'd probably want to watch our new ones, I would think. Send it to a friend. Talk about it on Facebook, Twitter. Any word of mouth, anything generates interest to revive IROC in some fashion. I want to see it happen, and I think you do too. Speak up in the comments, speak up everywhere. Your words are more important and more powerful than you think they are. If you haven't seen the first video we did with Ray at Big Iron Garage, you need to go watch that, because it gives you a lot more background and insight as to the evolution of IROC and the different series and iterations of the race cars that we did not cover in this video because we already did it in the first one. So definitely recommend you check that out. There's several cars in there that were not covered in this video either, because again, we already showed you them in this one.
The stuff spread out, you know, there's again one of the original seats, and their tires boxed up from cars, you know, parts, pieces, and then up top body parts. You know, there's some IROC gold Camaro body parts, some steel vintage parts. These are kind of our IROC shelves. Door skins, fender flares, spoilers.
For that Camaro you're doing in there, would you take those panels and repaint them, or leave those original and make new ones for that car?
Not sure yet. You know, again, that's why we're trying to figure out, are we going to be better off making new molds for it? I honestly, because we used to paint the IROC cars back and forth, I'd really love to put the original body panels on it so I can say it's original. I want to try and find as many original parts as I can. You know, there's got to be some parts out there, and so we have original body stuff, and I may, with that Camaro, it'd be really cool to put original body on it.